That's how my daughter began. No clearing of the throat, no cushioning of the fall. Just those words, like a door closing in a clean frame. I had the phone crooked against my shoulder, my thumb resting in the chip of my favorite mug, the one with the faded bluebirds. Coffee cooled on my tongue as silence settled. I could hear a blender in the background on her end, the easy domestic hum of a life in motion, and it was the mundanity of it that undid me. I imagined the protein powder, the flax seeds, the tidy jar labels I had bought her when she moved in with him. The blender roared, and then the world did not. "I see," I said, though I didn't. My mouth said the sensible thing while the floor of my kitchen shifted half an inch to the left. The phone felt heavy. My palm had that strange, hollow ache, like after you've been holding grocery bags too long. "It's just simpler, Mum. Less drama. We want a vibe." A vibe? As if I were a pothole in a newly paved road. The refrigerator clicked on. The cat, Mayo, because he's all white with a ridiculous pink nose, stretched a casual S across the linoleum. I stared at the wedding invitation on the table, the thick paper with its pretend decal edge, my name printed in a font that looked like it wanted to be kind. I'd already pressed the crease so many times the fold had gone soft. "I'll mail the card," I said. My mouth again. Not me. "I hope it's a beautiful day." A beat of relief from her. "Thank you, Mum. That's mature." The call ended. It took my breath with it, the way doors can pull air through a house. A bird startled off the maple outside. I set the phone down. I didn't cry. I just folded the sweater I'd laid across the back of the chair, the one I'd meant to wear, and slid it into the drawer, like closing a lid on a kindness that didn't belong to me anymore. The mug left a ring on the table that looked like an eclipse. The story of money is mostly receipts and the sound of your own footsteps in a bank lobby. It is also clanging radiators in apartments you once rented with a husband already coughing in his sleep. It is the envelope tucked under the mattress the year the company downsized, and your wedding ring could have paid 2 months of Cobra. It is a file of statements and a line graph that climbs like a steady hymn. Small contributions. Automatic. Boring as oatmeal. When my husband died, the factory cashed out his shares and sent a sympathy fern. I watched the men in dark suits pull the coffin like it weighed history. People came. People ate meatballs from a slow cooker and told me I was strong in the way you tell someone you won't be back. The house became too big. But I stayed. I made a project of it. New insulation, a roof that didn't sigh when it rained, a porch swing that fit me, and a blanket. I went back to work answering phones part-time and caught the bus on corners I used to drive past. I grew basil in a chipped pot and learned the names of the teenagers who bagged my groceries. You can live a whole life inside small economies, and nobody claps. With the pension, the 401k, the sale of a little plot of land neither of us had visited, his uncle's bad investment that turned out good, the accounts became what the lawyer called a comfortable estate. It felt indecent to hear it said like that. I was a girl from a town where people stuck extra pies on windowsills to cool because the oven heated the kitchen in August. But numbers stack themselves. Even you who think you are invisible can make $1 million over a long enough quiet. That million had a daughter tied to it, like a bright ribbon. I'd always imagined her at my kitchen table when I was old, unstacking bills with a sigh, then pressing my hand and telling me not to fuss. We would be polite to each other like two women on a church committee. We would tidy the past between coffee and the afternoon news. On the day she banned me from her wedding, The balance in my checking account was 2,143, so it's 52. The savings looked sturdy, and the hum of the refrigerator sounded like a promise it could keep. The cat blinked at me. He trusted the schedule. Food at 7, at 5, no drama. I stood there, a woman with plenty of money and nowhere to put it that would make sense anymore. 2 nights later, I couldn't sleep, so I organized a drawer. Old warranties, paper clips, rubber bands that had given up elasticity. I found a receipt from the venue deposit. My name was the payer. I'd written the check last year when she called it, "Just a placeholder, Mom. We'll refund you when Justin's bonus comes through." I'd believed her because believing your children is like breathing. It happens until it doesn't. The check stubs told a story I hadn't read. Cake tasting, photographer, dresses I pretended not to understand the price of because joy looks better in lace, and then a transfer to her for incidentals, the incidental of a life that did not have a chair for me. I set each stub in a neat line across the counter, like a paper picket fence I could lean against. The cat tried to nap on them in a democratic way. I slid him off with a fingertip. The house was very quiet. It had been quiet for years, but this was a new quiet, the kind that sounds like a held breath. My phone lit up. A group message with bridal party updates. Added by mistake, my number still in a list meant for everyone important. A rehearsal schedule. An instruction. No white, no loud prints, no drama. Keep the vibe within the palette. A little graphic with sprigs of eucalyptus. I stared at the word everyone. Then I did a practical thing because practicality is what I know how to do when emotion is not survivable. I took a yellow legal pad from the drawer, wrote the date at the top, underlined it, and then wrote in letters that looked like they belonged to my mother. Call Linda at the law office. Ask about updating will. I could hear my husband's cough. Not really. The brain is generous with echoes. But I remembered the last time he had looked at me over the rims of his glasses and said, "Whatever happens, don't let them build a house out of you." "I won't," I said aloud in the empty kitchen, and my voice sounded like someone else's. The bus was cold and smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and a deep, stubborn scent. Tired coats in winter. I sat near the front with my canvas bag, the one with fading red apples printed on it, and watched the city collect itself in windows. Laundromats blinking open in a sallow way, a man hosing down a sidewalk, the chopped glitter of broken glass on a corner where it always seems to be. The law office was above a dentist. The elevator had a mirror that told me an honest story. A woman whose hair had silvered in a way that makes hairdressers say, beautiful, like beauty is permission. I pressed the button for the third floor and saw my mouth compress into the line it always makes when I'm holding my breath. Linda had a bowl of candy that went untouched and a plant that I could tell she watered too much. Her sweater was one of those that signaled fall before the weather caught up. We have known each other 10 years in the way you know a bank teller or a neighbor who leaves their trash bins out too long. Reliable, distant affection. "What are we doing today?" she asked. A bright, professional voice. It felt like stepping onto clean linoleum after rain. "I need to change who gets what when I'm done with it," I said. I found the word done gentle. I liked that. I need the will to look different now, more honest to the moment. We went through the lists. Assets make a tidy chorus when you recite them in an office. Accounts, the house, the land fund, the CDs. She paused, pen poised. "Still leaving the bulk to your daughter?" "No." I watched the O of her mouth make a small life and die. No, I can't. Linda didn't say why. She asked, "Where would you like it to go then?" Outside the window, a woman crossed the street with a bouquet of helium balloons anchored by a brick wrapped in foil. They banged into her hair and made her bend, laughing to herself. I thought of the senior centre where I played bingo on Thursdays, where the coffee tasted like apology, where a woman named Pearl knitted blankets nobody asked for and then flinched when no one wanted to take one home. The centre, I said, and the library, and the community college, something for women like me who started working at 16 and never stopped. I swallowed. And some for the shelter, and some for hospice. They were kind to us. "And your daughter?" Linda asked brightly, though the brightness dimmed at the edges. "She'll receive a letter," I said. "Money makes a kind of noise that drowns out quieter truths. I want her to hear me without the roar." Linda nodded. "We can attach a statement of intent. Can you make it sound like someone civilized wrote it?" I tried to smile. It felt like finding an old key in a pocket. "We'll make it sound like you," she said. When I left the office, my hands were full of paper, and my chest was a room someone had just cracked a window in. On the way home, I stopped at the diner with the sticky menus and the waitress who wrote my name down when I first came in alone. "Marge," her name tag said, as if Marge were a promise the coffee would be hot and refills would arrive unsolicited. "You look like you just did something brave," Marge said, setting down my BLT and the extra pickle I always end up eating first. "Maybe I did," I said. The pickle snapped between my teeth. I looked around. A man held a baby who blinked at the ceiling. A teenager in a bright uniform stared at her phone, smiling at something only she could see. Life does not make room for your grief. It expects you to slide in sideways and not bump the condiments. You make decisions in offices. You live with them in closets. I pulled down boxes labelled in a handwriting that belonged to another decade. Holiday, taxes, photos. Mayo jumped in one and made a low sound, a fur-lined bowl of satisfaction. The closet air was dust and cedar. I sneezed. My knees protested like old friends who think they're funny. I laid everything on the bed. My mother's brooch, heavier than it looked. A stack of letters bound with twine. Who taught me to do that? It felt like something I would have read in a women's magazine. A tip for organizing keepsakes. A wedding veil that had browned at the edges like bread. Here is what I didn't do. I didn't make a bonfire of photographs. I didn't cut faces out. I didn't narrate the history of a family into a tape recorder like someone instructing a museum visitor. I held things. I let them warm in my hands. Then I let them go. I made a box for my daughter anyway. Not a punitive one, a humane one. There were pictures of her in a bathing suit, gap-toothed, leaping off a dock. There was the drawing she made in second grade of my mom at work, which was a rectangle with a smaller rectangle inside, and me smiling at a telephone like it had told me a secret. There was the letter she sent me from college, apologizing for leaving an angry voicemail, saying she'd had a bad day, and it wasn't my fault she had inherited my eyebrows. I tucked in the brooch because I couldn't picture it on anyone but her, even now. At the bottom of a shoebox, I found a card my husband had given me on our 20th anniversary. There was no cash inside it, no gift certificate to the hardware store he worshipped like a clean church. Only a simple sentence written in his carpenter's blunt hand. "You make a home out of air." I pressed it to my chest. I felt a little foolish. I felt accompanied. Outside, the maple had started colouring early, one red leaf like an ember in a bowl of green. I taped the boxes shut. The tape made that satisfying scream that sounds like something definite is happening. I labeled them with more care than I've used to address some checks. To be returned, to be given, to be thrown away later after I'm gone. Humor lives in odd places. I found some. When my phone buzzed, I almost didn't look. But the habits of motherhood are muscles that don't atrophy easily. It was a message from my daughter, forwarded from the planner. Reminder: please confirm guest list. We are limiting +1s and extended family to keep the event intimate. I stared at the words intimate and family and understood that my presence would have made the room honest. Some intimacies can't afford honesty. I set the phone face down and ran my hand across the folded sweaters. Soft, obedient things. It's possible to love what doesn't love you back. Possible and survivable. I pictured myself showing up at the venue, standing at the back in a tasteful navy dress, hair pinned, a small clutch, dignity clutched tighter. I imagined the way heads would turn, the way hers would, the way that look she gets, the one that used to slay me when she was 14, would settle in. The planner would hustle over. Someone would whisper, "Is that her?" I would leave early, a myth restored to its proper place. It was a petty fantasy, the kind the brain feeds you like candy corn, bright, unsatisfying. Instead, I went to the senior centre. Thursday, bingo. The plastic tablecloth had a tear, and someone had fixed it with scotch tape so neat it looked like intention. Pearl handed me a blanket again. "For when the cold settles," she said, eyes flitting away from mine like a sparrow afraid of its own shadow. "I'm warm enough," I said, but took it. Warmth isn't always about temperature. We played. I won once, and the prize was a jar of apple butter and a packet of tea that tasted like someone had whispered cinnamon over a cup of hot water. I loved it anyway. After, I went into the little office and asked the director, a woman with tidy hair and the kind of shoes that must be bought for standing, what a bequest could do for them. She blinked rapidly, as if her eyes were trying to drink. "We could replace the boiler before it fails in January," she said, and then, almost in a whisper, "We could add a grief group. We keep waiting for a volunteer therapist who doesn't come." I nodded. "I will make sure the boiler doesn't fail." She didn't ask where such confidence came from. She only pressed my hands between hers the way women have been inventing comfort since cave times. I wrote a note on one of their forms in my square, schoolteacher handwriting, "Consider grief group." On the way home, I passed the bridal shop. The mannequins stared through me with their long, blank lids. I remembered the seamstress pinning my daughter into a dress at 15 for a formal, the pins flashing like small, impatient fish. I remembered how lightly my daughter lifted her arms, as if they were wings she didn't want to admit to owning. I prayed, yes, still, that her dress now made her feel held, not trapped. Prayer is not something I say aloud anymore, but it remains, as reliable as the hum of an appliance. 3 days before, I received an email with the subject line, "Expectations for guests." It had been forwarded twice. I don't know if that was an accident or a test. People test those they love even when they've dismissed them. The rules were simple. Arrive on time. Don't wear white. Don't make toasts uninvited. Don't post photos early. Don't bring drama. The word drama again, as if it were a brand of stain on an otherwise clean shirt. I read the rules, and then I wrote my own. Make tea. Feed cat. Fold sweater. Don't compose a speech you won't give. Remember the maple's red leaf, and that one is enough to announce a season. Call the lawyer and confirm. I called Linda. "We're set for Monday," she said. 2 o'clock. We'll sign. "Thank you," I said. "Are you sure?" she asked gently. "I'm sure that uncertainty is a kind of grief, and I have had enough of it," I said. "I'm sure of that." After I hung up, I took out a piece of stationery I'd been saving for letters I never wrote. It had a border of bees and lavender, because I once thought I would be the kind of woman who wrote spring notes in a good pen. I dated the top and began, "My darling girl." I chose each word as if I were building a small wooden boat and planned to sail it on a careful pond. I did not mention money in the first paragraph. I mentioned the day she was born, the long, low afternoon that surprised us both. I mentioned a scar on her chin from a fall off her bicycle, and how she had cried not from pain, but from embarrassment. I mentioned the exact colour of the sky on a morning we both remember, the one where we ate toast by the sink, laughing at nothing. Then I wrote the truth. I wrote that love is not a ticket to bad manners. I wrote that removing someone from your rituals is a way of declaring them dead while their heart continues. I wrote that I would not be paying for my own absence. I wrote that my will had found new names. When I was done, I folded the paper so the bees met. I addressed the envelope and stuck a stamp at an exact right angle. The neatness calmed me. Then I tucked it in the drawer with the folded sweater. I was beginning to see what the drawer was for. Saturday bloomed damp. The forecast had promised sun with a light breeze, the kind of smiley face you draw next to 72 degrees. Instead, the sky was the colour of an old sink. Rain feathered the sidewalks, then made a firm point of it. Somewhere, a florist adjusted plans. I made scrambled eggs. I toasted an English muffin and put butter on it with the generosity I save for days nobody else witnesses. I fed the cat. I watered the basil. I sat at the table and listened to the refrigerator hum like a kindly witness. At noon, I put on the navy dress anyway. I pinned my hair. I fastened my mother's brooch at the shoulder and stood in front of the mirror long enough to recognize myself, but not long enough to begin the litany women know. If only, if only, if only. Then I took off the dress, hung it back in its plastic sleeve, and put on my walking shoes. I walked the neighborhood like it was an old friend I needed to check on. The maple had 3 red leaves now. The air smelled like wet paper and lawn. Kids in slickers rampaged puddles with the merciless joy of the uninvited. I passed the church where my husband's service had been and nodded toward the steps as if they had a pulse. At 2, when the vows were being said under an arbour I had helped pay for, I sat on the bus, headed to the library. The driver had a radio station tuned to oldies. A woman sang along, not well, but with that particular determination that keeps people alive past statistics. The bus hissed and knelt for an old man with a cane. I offered him my seat, and he said, "No, you take it, sweetheart. I've been offered a lot of things I didn't sit in." We both laughed. It sounded like metal chairs scraping a gym floor. Awkward, familiar, necessary. In the library, I browsed the biographies and ran my fingers along spines like I was reading Braille for a story where the protagonist survives. A girl asked me where the bathrooms were with infinite courtesy, as if my hair made me a docent. I approved of her manners like a queen knighting a citizen. Then I sat in a chair by the window and watched rain walk itself across the parking lot. At 4, I took the envelope I had addressed, walked to the post office box on the corner, and slipped the letter into the blue mouth. I did it slowly. I imagined the clank inside, the way paper finds paper, the way a thing leaves your hand and becomes part of a system you don't control. When I got home, I boiled potatoes. I mashed them with sour cream and black pepper, because grief sometimes wants what the church calls potluck. I ate from a bowl, standing at the counter. Then I washed the dish, wiped the ring of water, and sat, listening to the house breathe like an animal sleeping on the rug. Sunday was the chatter after a storm. Sun showed up as if it hadn't been missing. The maple looked smug. I went to church out of habit and to see faces I knew in their church faces. The same eyes, different hats. The sermon was on forgiveness and sounded like a song I had once loved but couldn't sing along with anymore. People squeezed my hand without knowing why I needed it squeezed. By afternoon, the texts started. A picture of my daughter in lace, framed by flowers the size of hubcaps, her smile practiced and real. A picture of the cake, 3 tiers, the middle one with dots. A picture of them dancing, her head tipped back in surprising lightness. A caption from a cousin who had always been kind. Beautiful day. It was kind of her to send them. It was unkind to the part of me that had been a mother longer than I have been anything else. I did not reply. I did not press the heart. I turned my phone over and looked at a scratch I'd never noticed, thin as a hair, curving across the case like a river on a cheap map. Monday morning, the message arrived, cheerful as an invoice. Hey Mom, hope you're well. We're booking the honeymoon flights today and the venue says the remaining balance is due by Friday. Could you send the transfer? Love you. Love you. The small artillery of family warfare. I made tea. I put the mug down on a slip of paper that had the lawyer's address on it, protecting the wood. Practicalities matter when the heart feels like a window a ball has just smashed. Then I sat at the table and wrote back, No, sweetheart, I will not be sending more money. I hope you had a beautiful day. I'm at the lawyer this afternoon updating things. We'll be in touch. 3 dots animated, worms performing a choreography of entitlement. Then, what? Why are you being like this? Are you mad you didn't come? You chose that. I deleted 3 different drafts of a reply that would have thrown furniture across our years. Then I typed, I chose to honor your choice. I put the phone in a drawer. The drawer had become useful. At 2 o'clock, the lawyer's office smelled faintly of peppermint and toner. Linda slid papers across the desk with the skill of a dealer in a very grown-up card game. Initial here, here, and here. Sign here. She explained each section, and I listened like a good student. But what I heard was my own blood making that dull ocean noise in my ears. Survival has a soundtrack. By signing, you're revoking prior dispositions and replacing them with this, she said. These letters of intent will be included. We'll notarize everything. Copies will be sent to the named institutions if you like. Yes, I said. Send them. Let it be real in more than one room. The notary had a stamp that made a satisfying thunk, as if pounding a small stake into claimable land. The pen was heavy, the good kind, the kind that makes you take your hand seriously. When I wrote my name, I heard my father saying it at roll call on the first day of school, because he had been a janitor there and liked to volunteer for important moments. I heard my husband say my name when he was feverish, as if I were the planet he was trying to return to. I heard my daughter say it when she was 3, sticky with applesauce. Names collect echoes. That's their job. When it was done, Linda leaned back with a small sigh that sounded like a person who had positioned a picture frame straight on a wall. How do you feel? She asked. Taller, I said. And also very tired. That seems right, she said. When grief gets rearranged, the body notices. She walked me to the elevator. On the way, she pointed to a photograph of her son in a baseball uniform. He's the reason I do wills. It feels like tying a knot that holds through wind. She touched my elbow. You did a hard, good thing. Outside, the city went on ignoring me in an almost comforting way. I stopped at the bakery and bought a donut for no reason. I ate it on the walk to the bus, sugar dusting my sweater, and then I brushed the sugar off and felt something like mercy for myself. She came on Wednesday. I saw her from the front window and had enough time to put the kettle on, which felt like hospitality even if we were playing different games. When she stepped into the kitchen, she looked around like people do when they're deciding how to feel. Her face was thinner than the last time I'd studied it with patience. Wedding planning carves a person. She was beautiful the way a field is beautiful when not planted with what you hoped. Still an honest piece of earth, but different. "Mum," she said, putting her bag on a chair without asking if anyone already lived there. "What is going on?" I gestured to the table. We sat. I poured tea into 2 cups that didn't match, because I have never felt the urge to buy a set for the sake of guests. Her hands were shaking. Mine were not, which felt like a betrayal of my character. I have always been the trembler in the family, the one whose voice wobbled in parent-teacher conferences when the teacher said precocious, like it was a diagnosis. "I changed my will," I said. "I made some choices about where the money goes when I'm no longer here to feed the cat." "Why?" Her eyes were damp, but her mouth was set in the line that had disciplined me long before I was old enough to be disciplined by anyone but myself. "Because you're punishing me for a boundary?" I said I needed a certain vibe. That wasn't about you. You made it about you. "I hear you," I said, and I meant it. "I believe you that your wedding was about you. My money is about me." "You always do this," she said. She cradled the mug without drinking. "You make everything a lesson." "I tried to make everything a home," I said. "Sometimes lessons came because I didn't know how to explain the architecture." She looked at the envelope in the middle of the table. I had placed it there like a centerpiece. "Is that—" "Yes," I said. "A copy of the letter you'll receive in the mail. And some photographs for you to keep. And your grandmother's brooch, though you don't have to wear it. You don't have to do anything, really. That is the only actual truth I've learned." I slid the envelope toward her. She didn't pick it up. She stared at my hands instead, perhaps hoping to see a trembling that would prove her right about me. I let them lie as if they were pieces of someone I respected. "I can't believe you would do this," she said, voice thinning to a string. "After everything I've done for you." "What have you done for me?" The question was not cruel. It was a real question. I asked it gently, and even to my ears it sounded like a door opened and no wind. She blinked, shocked by the math of love when it is set on a table and asked to show its work. "I've—" She stopped. The room was not her witness. It was mine. She tried again. "I visited. I called. I asked you to come to brunch. I told you when we got engaged." "You told Instagram," I said, and smiled in a way that was kind to both of us. "And then your cousin called me to check if I was okay, because she knew I would not have heard." A small silence laid itself over us like a cloth. She looked at the cat, which was rude enough to yawn. "You're being dramatic," she said finally. "I'm being administrative," I said. "I have updated my paperwork." She stood, chair legs squealing against the floor. "Fine," she said. "Fine. Do what you want. Don't be surprised when no one wants to be around you at the end." "I am around me at the end," I said. I have to be. I'd like other people there too, but I won't buy audience. She picked up the envelope and held it like a hot plate. This is cruel, she said. No, I said, surprising both of us with the calm in my mouth. What I could have done would have been cruel. Show up, make a scene, throw the ring in the punch bowl, sell the house out from under you in the middle of a snowstorm, start mailing everyone screenshots of their worst lines. I have done the opposite. I have simply put things where they belong. She stared at me as if I had moved a piece on a board she didn't know I had. Goodbye, she said. She held onto the back of the chair as if walking were a trick. Then she left, the door clicking shut like a polite period. When she was gone, I sat and held the warm side of my mug. The house settled around me with little cracking sounds, as if it were an old friend trying not to make its age audible. I breathed. Mayo jumped onto my lap and kneaded my thigh like he was kneading dough that would not rise without patience. I know, I told him. I know. The next days were a kind of weather I don't have a name for. Not storm, not clear. The phone did not ring much. A cousin texted a heart that looked like it had been drawn by a child. A neighbour left a pound cake on the stoop, the kind in a pan shaped like a wreath. I cut a slice and stood at the sink to eat it. People eat standing at sinks when they don't know what else to do next. I went to the grocery store and bought butter, eggs, lettuce, a magazine about fall soups that had a woman on the cover who looked as if she had never been denied entry to anything. A flour bag broke on the conveyor belt, and white dust bloomed like a small ghost. The boy bagging apologized so sincerely I almost cried. It's all right, I said. I was due for a little snowfall. At home, I cleaned a drawer that held Tupperware lids and 3 unpaired socks. I listened to the 5 p.m. news tell me about people who were in worse trouble than I am. I made a pot of minestrone and ate it for 3 days, the kind of thrift that makes you feel virtuous and lonely at once. Linda called to confirm the letters had been sent and received. The centre director cried, she said, as if relaying weather. The library director left a message for you with more gratitude than is healthy. The college requested a meeting about setting up a scholarship. We can loop them in when you're ready. I am, I said, and I was. Not ready for joy, exactly, but ready for the kind of work that feels like smoothing a wrinkled sheet over a bed. There is dignity in getting corners right. That evening, I opened the box labelled "To be given" and took out the veil. I spread it over the kitchen table, and the kitchen changed shape, became a room where children would exclaim over hiding under a cloud. I folded it back into the box and wrote a note on top. For someone who needs something old and something soft. Not a rule, just a suggestion. I took the box to the thrift store the next morning and set it on the counter. The woman looked at the veil like it was made of aspirin. Someone will be grateful, she said. I drove home on streets I could travel with my eyes closed, and didn't. You don't tempt fate at my age. The maple now had a crown of red, a serious decision made without consulting me. I approved. At the community college, the conference room was clean, in a way hospitals aspire to. Fresh paint, a long table, chairs that took you seriously. The development officer was my age, or maybe 10 years younger. The trick of lighting and optimism makes estimation unreliable. She wore a scarf like a small flag and had a notebook full of tidy boxes ready to be checked. We can establish a fund in your name or in someone else's, she said. Her voice softened. Sometimes it helps to think of a story you want to keep walking around after you're gone. Name it after my mother, I said, surprising myself. She finished ninth grade and could count change in her head faster than anyone I knew. She wanted to be a teacher, but her father pulled her out to work in the store. She made learning look like dessert. We discussed amounts and payouts and sustainability until the conversation felt like it had eaten every available chair. Then she leaned forward. What kind of student? Older women, I said. Ones who thought it was too late. I pictured Pearl at the senior center, her hands busy, her eyes ducking. Mothers who had to be a bridge so long they forgot they were also people who could walk across it. She smiled the way you do when a story puts its hand on your wrist. We can do that, she said. We will do that. I signed more papers. The pen was lighter than Linda's, but still made marks I recognized. We talked about a small reception someday, a plaque, a photograph the college would frame. No picture, I said. A plaque with a simple sentence is plenty. For women who begin again. On the way out, I walked past classrooms where the light through blinds made stripes across whiteboards. A young woman with a baby in a sling stood in the hallway reading a schedule like it was a difficult poem. Do you need a hand finding something? I asked, surprising us both. The bursar, she said. I keep losing the arrow on this map. I walked her there. We didn't talk much. I held the door for her, and she said, "Thank you," like a person who had learned to make a thank you carry a backpack. When I got home, I wrote the sentence on a sticky note and stuck it to the refrigerator. Mayo tried to bat it off. For women who begin again, I read aloud to him. For women who begin again. The refrigerator hummed approval. On Sunday, I made soup and invited Pearl and Marge and the neighbour who had left the pound cake and the boy from the grocery store, who turned out to be named Orlando and had a grandmother in El Paso who used to make him egg custard when he got good grades. They came to my house shyly, people who didn't expect to be assembled in a room together. I laid out bowls and a stack of napkins I had ironed, because ironing napkins is one of my private loves, right up there with washing measuring cups by hand. I lit a candle that smelled like apples. We ate, and we told the kind of small stories that form the actual spine of a life. The time the bus was late, and everyone at the stop laughed when it finally came, as if the bus had done it on purpose. The way the clinic nurse had squeezed Pearl's shoulder and said, "You are brave," when really she was just on time. The day Marge switched a coffee order with a stranger and didn't have the energy to correct the universe. So she drank it and discovered she did, after all, like oat milk. We talked like people on the deck of a ship that is steady and will not sink under anyone's feet today. I did not tell them about the wedding. I did not need to. My life was in the room in front of me, and it did not require footnotes. We washed dishes together, and Marge dried them with the competence of a woman who has closed 1,000 diners at midnight with only her wits and a stack of plates. Orlando took out the trash. Pearl folded the blanket she had given me and patted it like it was resting. When they left, the house was quiet in the old good way. I sat at the table with a cup of tea and a square of the pound cake I had saved from myself. I thought of my daughter lifting a glass somewhere, of photos being organized, of thank you notes being drafted. I wished her an uncomplicated night's sleep. I wished myself the same. Later, I stood on the porch. The maple was nearly red. The air had that crispness that makes you think of school supplies. A young couple walked by with a stroller and nodded at me like I belonged on porches. I nodded back. "Good evening," I said, which is what people in this neighborhood say, even when the day was not good. A month later, A plain envelope arrived with my name printed in familiar letters. Inside was a card with a photograph of two hands with rings, a scripted thank you for the gift I had not sent. "We hope to see you soon," it ended, as if time was something they could invite me to. I put the card in the drawer with the sweater, the bees, the stamps. I stood there with the drawer open longer than necessary, the way you stand at the ocean and let the wind slap your sleeves into attention. Then I closed it. I took my checkbook and wrote the largest check I've ever written to the senior centre with boiler in the memo line. I wrote another to the library for whatever breaks after dark. I wrote a smaller one to the diner, staff fund for sick days, and handed it to Marge, who tried to hand it back like I'd given her contraband. "Don't make a fuss," I told her, and we both laughed because fuss keeps a lot of people alive. In the afternoon, I went to the park. There's a bench with a plaque for a man nobody remembers except the man who bought the plaque, and the squirrels have made the area around it look like a small excavation site. I sat and watched a father teach a boy how to ride a bike. "Look up," he said, and the boy trembled with the holiness of it. "Look up." The bike wobbled and then didn't. They whooped. They made a sound that braided hope and terror and got something right. I clapped once, softly, like a woman in a theatre who doesn't want to call attention to herself, but can't help siding with triumph. When I got home, I opened the window an inch and let the air climb into the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. Mayo investigated the breeze like it owed him money. I made tea. I folded a blanket. I checked the lock. I stood for a moment with my hand on the counter, feeling the steady plane of it under my palm. There are days when I imagine my daughter will call and say the hard words that free two people from the same trap. I'm sorry, and I know. There are days when I know that call will not come. On both kinds of days, I set the table with one plate, and I eat what I have made, and I write the check I can, and I begin again. I didn't ban her from my love. Love more stubborn than rage has taken too much of my life to be evicted now. I simply moved the furniture. I put chairs where people will sit. I opened a door I can walk through. Legacy is a word like a heavy coat. It keeps you from freezing if you don't try to sleep in it. The maple went entirely red, then let go leaf by leaf, like a woman who has learned that surrender can be an art. I swept them into a pile and let the neighborhood children fall into it, shrieking. In the mound, a lost hair tie, a tiny plastic dinosaur, a penny gone green. I pocketed the penny. I gave the dinosaur to a boy who frowned as if he'd misplaced land. The hair tie I looped on my wrist out of habit, a readiness for a future where wind tangles hair and women laugh and look up. Inside, the house warmed itself. The will rested where it was supposed to, legal and untheatrical. The letters were in their envelopes in other buildings now, changing the shape of rooms I will never enter. My daughter wore her ring. I wore my quiet. Both of us were married to our choices. Both of us would wake to them, day after day, the way the refrigerator hums, whether you are hungry or not. The way the maple decides its own season. The way a woman, older now and her own, pulls a sweater from a drawer and goes on.